Welcome back to the Soar to Success Summit. I'm Vanessa Levin, your host, and joining me on the stage today is Leighanne Scheuermann. Welcome, Leighanne.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We are so excited to have you here. And for those of you who are new, and let me tell you a little bit about Leighanne. So Leighanne Scheuermann is a reading and learning specialist in Dallas, Texas. She received her master's degree in reading from Teachers College Columbia University and a master's in social work from the University of Pennsylvania. She shares ways to build reading skills at home through nurturing and playful activities at writtenandbound.com. So I am excited to have you here because... Go ahead.
I'm excited to be here.
Playful learning at home. So the topic of the summit is play. So I wanted to talk to you about ways to make learning at home more playful. Because, you know, when it comes to learning at home, or maybe the word homework, I think there's some mindset work that we need to do before we can even begin to discuss this topic. Because I know, like for me and for a lot of people watching today, that homework to us might mean whatever we remember doing as a child at home, which in most cases, for a lot of us, that was worksheets. So what are your thoughts about that? And can you help us reframe our mindset a little bit?
Sure. I think you're absolutely right that we have to start there. I know as early educators, so many of us have heard the quote that a child's work is their play. And that's hard to fully understand until you see it really happening and really in a very engaging and long-term way. I think so many of us, as you said, had a very different experience with school. And so I often ask parents to think about what their most vivid memories of school are or were, because I think what makes those memories transfer into our long-term memory are something that ignites all of our senses. So we might remember making mud pies or learning to write our name in the dirt or the sand, but we don't remember that third grade teacher who gave us packets every single day, or we don't remember what was on the packet. So I do think that I often hear parents say they have a lot of guilt for not working with their child enough. And that's something that I would really hope we as educators can help parents feel less guilty about, because I do think that more strategic, playful activities are more beneficial than working, quote, working with your children before they go to school, for so many reasons that I'm sure we're going to talk about today. But I think children who are allowed to play and learn are not just playing, but they're also learning to trust their own ideas. They're learning to find their voice. They're learning to take risks. And so I think that there's so many benefits. As a reading specialist, every reading program that comes my way claims to be multisensory, and they typically claim to allow children to master a concept before they move on. So what that means to me in relation to early childhood is that wouldn't it be great if all children could learn in that way? If all children were able to experience letters and sounds in a multisensory way and within context, in the hopes that it would create more long-lasting memories rather than just filling out word family worksheets for a few weeks and then moving on to a new one.
Exactly. I so agree. That reminds me of a lot of folks in my family are very active people. They have a lot of energy and they learn in a very tactile way, me included, myself included. But I'm thinking about my cousin and her daughter, who is extremely brilliant, talented little artist. She's 9 years old now and does very well in school. But when it comes to homework, You know, she gets these packets sent home because she's in the testing grades, right? And it is a really difficult uphill battle for her parents every single night. And here's this bright, energetic, happy-go-lucky, talented young child who turns into this angry, you know, stubborn. It's just a battle every night. It's a battle. And that is not how she learns. And that is not, it's not going to be any joyful memory for her for sure. Right?
No. Right. And she's most likely not going to remember the concepts that she's supposed to learn in those worksheets, which is the whole point, right, of sending the homework home. So I think for parents who, you know, going back to your question, like for parents who really feel that they need to be implementing this time before it is enforced from school, I mean, it's such an opportunity to create unnecessary power struggles that we know from like your, is it your niece?
Yeah,
your
it's
niece's experience. Is that what you said? Your niece? Yeah. From her experience, I mean, I think that's a very common experience. And we already know that many of our children are going to struggle later. And so before they're in these standard-based schools that, you know, create learning in only one way, why not take this opportunity now to bond with our children in a different way? Yeah.
I totally agree. So we've talked about, you know, how children learn in playful ways, and that, you know, we want their memories to be good, but let's dive a little bit deeper into, what does playful learning at home look like versus the worksheet type standards-based stuff that we talked about? Can you get into some of the educational benefits of playful learning at home?
Sure. Well, as we sort of touched on just a minute ago, you know, if all of this research is saying that children more likely transfer something into their long-term memory if they experience it with their senses, then there's obviously that benefit of actually learning the concepts as opposed to memorizing them in their short-term memory and letting it go. But then there's also this opportunity to grow closer with your child. So I heard a therapist once say that all the interactions we have with our children are sort of like a fabric, and every interaction can either like sew us closer together or pull us apart. And so I thought that was such a beautiful way of saying, how can we find ways to sort of pull us closer together? So through learning. So obviously there's the benefit of memory. There's the benefit of bonding with your child and having a safe and secure space for their learning to sort of explore and to ask questions and to be wrong. So that can also create quite a bit of confidence. And so I think one of the benefits that I see is if a child has had a playful learning experience at home or in their preschool education, then if they encounter problems later in learning to read, they are more likely to come into intervention with me feeling confident or feeling safe and not feeling like they already have this huge negative emotion towards all books. And of course, that's not the way it always is, but I think with most children, if they've had that experience where they feel like they are a learner, and that they feel that they've bonded with a caretaker who's read aloud to them, then they feel slightly more confident and safe coming into a space where they know they're going to practice in a different way. Does that make sense and sort of answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, it brought up something for me, too, while you were talking, especially in relation to you as a reading specialist. So I sometimes tutor children who are struggling in kindergarten with reading, and sometimes even in first grade, in my spare time. And
right.
I think what
I'm sure you have a lot of it.
Yeah. Don't we all? But what I've noticed, what you said was really, I really want to make sure that our viewers today hear what you said there. I want to highlight it for them because, for example, with this little girl that I worked with, it was a couple years ago. She came from a place, from a program where she didn't have a lot of playful, fun interactions in her daily classroom life when she was in kindergarten. And her parents viewed school as a place, where you were to go and sit, and the learning would be dumped into your brain, and then you would, and that's okay, because that's how a lot of people think it is. So what happened was she turned into a first grader who thought of her, she had a very negative self-image. I can't read. I'm dumb. She used to say, I'm dumb. I'm stupid. I can't read. And she had no frame of reference for this playful way that I was helping her learn. And so at the end of our sessions together, her mom would come pick her up, and her mom would always say, how did she do? Did she listen? Did she do her work? And I would say, oh, she was fabulous. And she was. And the mom would look at her and say, what did you learn? And she would say, I played. And then her mom would look at me with these big eyes. And I would have to explain, well, yes, we did play, but here's what she learned. And so it was a real uphill battle for a child who had been, who was failing first grade. So I think that what you said about, understanding the value of play, not just for us as teachers, but for parents too. Would you agree? It's so important, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, and I think we'll probably talk even more about this today, but I think such a huge part of teachers' jobs today are convincing the parents that this is valuable and that we aren't wasting time, and that, if you're paying for preschool or if you're in a private school, you aren't wasting money to have them come and play here, that it's very strategic.
Yes.
The play is very strategic, and we do our best to implement concepts that we want them to learn, but in a playful way, because as you said, that is how they actually internalize these concepts, if it's in context for them.
Yes.
I do think, and when I gave the example about the therapist, I in no way want any parent or teacher to think that I'm perfect at that, or that I know any parents who are, because I think that was the point the therapist was trying to make, is you always have a chance to make it up. Not every encounter is going to be perfect, and we know that as educators also. Every day we think of something we could have done differently. So it's a journey, but it's such a huge opportunity that we have to sort of create, as you were saying, create confidence in our children. And that is going to help them in so many areas in life that go beyond just getting good grades. It reminds me so much of that. I think we might have talked about this, that book by Carol Dweck, Mindset, where she talks about, and I taught middle school for a very short time, and I'm not a middle school teacher. I recently had this experience, and I learned so much from it because I'm not a trained middle school teacher. And I saw that when our children were in 5th and 6th grade, they already had this fixed mindset that Carol Dweck talks about, where what you just provided as that example is, I am either smart or not smart. I'm good at this or not good at this. And that book really breaks down the science behind having a growth mindset, which is allowing our kids to believe that effort is so much of success, and that work really comes into play in anything that you want to be successful in. And that's just something that's not really a part of the language in early childhood as much as we want it to be. But I think what you're getting at is by allowing them to play, that's where they are learning and taking risks and being allowed to fail. And that creates that long-term growth mindset
Right.
that is kind of hard to come by now
It is.
in today's society. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. So that brings me to my next question then. So I feel like we have a good grasp on, the benefits of playful learning at home. They're far greater. It's like, as I say all the time, playful learning is like pushing a boulder downhill, and worksheets at home are like pushing a boulder uphill. It's a lot harder.
Yes, exactly. And I know that from experience. Yeah, you're a teacher and you think, oh, I'm going to come into parenting knowing what I'm doing. And then yet you find yourself arguing with your children about getting things done. And I have to stop and say, wait a minute, this is not helping. Is this helping? No. Okay,
Right.
let's change. As we said, it's a journey.
Exactly.
But I agree. It's like pushing something uphill.
Yes. So that brings me to so what suggestions do you have then? If worksheets are not the answer to learning at home, that begs the question then, what can we do that's fun and playful for our students and the parents? What are your best ideas for that?
Some of my best ideas are creating a habit of reading aloud every night, and not breaking that habit. That's the sacred space that you create with your child, that can carry all the way through middle school. You can read aloud to your children. You are not cheating by reading aloud to them. And I always tell parents when the school starts saying, please have your child practice reading 10, 20, 30 minutes a night, don't interrupt that space that you've already created with them, because they expect for that to be a cozy and bonding and nurturing time. So don't ask them to read during that time if it becomes a point of frustration. Reading aloud, and then creating some just general print awareness concepts as you're reading aloud. Sometimes when I work with children who have language-based disabilities, they're still often confused about they'll always skip the second page for some reason. And so that's just something that through habit they have to continue to do to practice. But just, pointing out, we read from this way to this way, the front of the book, the back of the book. Reading aloud really allows them to internalize story structure, which is something that they are going to continue to practice all the way through high school. So you have such an opportunity at a young age when you're reading aloud every day, to help your children understand that every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every story has a main character who has a problem, and that problem is resolved by the end. If you think about it, what our students are doing in high school when they're asked to write a 5-paragraph essay about a character's internal struggle, that really goes back to what our children learned about story structure in early childhood. So relating something or a problem in a story to society is something that they started doing when they were 3 and 4, and they saw themselves in a book. And they said, oh, that's like when I didn't want to go on the diving board, So there's such an opportunity with creating a consistent story time, and just every now and then pointing out, without making it a forced conversation, pointing out those story structure concepts, stopping and saying, what do you think's going to happen next? Teaching them predictions, how to make predictions. Also, I think something that I love to use picture books for is to reinforce phonics skills, but not saying, okay, today we're going to study the silent E sound. But it's so exciting for a child when you're reading aloud to them at home and it reminds them of something that they learned in school. So it lets them be the expert, and they get to say, that's just like how Miss Patty taught me the E sound this week, So the one I just picked up, is actually one of my favorite books that I read for the short E sound, Nanette's Baguette. And then there's Henny Penny. But again, I don't say we're going to study phonics now. This is a great one also, wings for the ing sound, and it's rhyming. So this little bird, this brand new bird, is learning to fly, and it's all rhyming. So first they cling to the side of the nest, and then they fling themselves from the nest, and then all of the other words are rhyming in the bird's journey to learn to fly. Some of these are my favorite also, when sometimes for older kids I'm doing sight words, they have repetition. This one repeats the word this. And this is a great one for early childhood educators and for parents of young kids. It's such a beautiful story about a mom who's trying to get their child to school, and the child keeps saying, wait, look at this, wait, look at that. And the mom keeps saying, hurry. But it's just repeating these two words over and over again, which in so many ways provides so many opportunities for our children to relate to the story, to internalize some of those words and those spellings. So obviously read aloud, story structure. I have some labels on my website that you might want to just play with your child and label your home the way that most preschools are labeled. So labeling desk, door, dresser, and you can make it into a game by saying, okay, let's run around the house and see if you can label all the objects that start with D. And then going and saying, okay, how many objects in our house start with the letter D or the D sound? So that's a fun one. Going back to rhyming, I think there are so many things you can do with rhyming that are not worksheet based. Again, I think so many people want to say, let's fill out a word family worksheet. But instead, you might create a hopscotch board with sidewalk chalk. And if your students are studying letter names and formation and sounds, then, they toss the beanbag and it lands on the A sound, and they can say A, apple, ah, or they can come up with words that start with A as they jump on through the hopscotch. You can also do that with word families. So maybe you pick 2 word families to fill the hopscotch board with, like at and ag. And then as they're jumping, if their beanbag landed on the at family, then they could say bat, mat, sat, and they're rhyming with you as they're jumping, which, I don't know, you can tell me as an early childhood expert, this is not something I know, but I always feel as though maybe all young children are kinesthetic learners. So,
yeah.
I mean, I know later, yeah. Is that what you would say?
Yes.
Yeah, later on we can sort of see the vast differences in the way in which we all learn differently. But as young children, I think they all learn as they're running and playing and moving and feeling. So hopscotch is a great one. I always ask parents to take advantage of being in the car. Games like Anna, Anna, Bobana. Those things create such long lifetime memories that I think are really special. When you go on a walk and you see a stop sign, you might say, oh, there's that ah sound, stop. And then you just start rhyming. Mop, flop, hop. What else rhymes with stop? That can also be an opportunity to increase vocabulary. We were doing that the other day with a group of students, and we said something like log, bog, and somebody said, what's a bog? And so then we stopped and talked about that. I always remind parents that reading is not just sounding out words. So it includes reading, writing, listening, and speaking are the 4 components of literacy. So I just remind them that they are already doing so much with their children without creating that homework time. So when you're reading aloud to them, maybe they end up acting out a story with you later on, or they play charades. These are all things that promote early literacy. If you have a child who loves to tell stories, loves to talk, loves to take notes, then you might want to write down their story for them and make it really special and say, this is your first book as an author. Something I've always wanted to try that I haven't done yet is also having a young student's story created into a book using something like chat books or something. And then listening. Podcasts are so great for preschoolers. Story Pirates is one of my favorites, where they take children's writing and then a group of actors acts them out with songs, and they just make it very creative. Kids love it, and it does generally inspire children to tell stories or to want to write their own stories. So those are a few of my ideas.
So let me ask you a few questions, because I had some questions as you were going. So tell me more about Story Pirates. Is that an app or a website?
Both, but it's an app and a podcast.
Oh, and a podcast. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so,
well, let me correct myself. I'm not sure if it's an app, but it's a podcast.
It's a podcast. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. So, if our viewers go there, they can preview it and decide if it's something that would be beneficial for their students or their children, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so they tell children's stories. How do they get these stories?
They do. So they've inspired kids to write stories. And again, I think if your children are young, you can write it down for them and submit it. So then you mail it to them or you submit it online in an email. And then they choose certain stories to act out. It's really fantastic. I mean, they've created so much buzz that I think some celebrities have gotten involved, and they're quite funny. They make them very, very funny. Okay. So that's a great one. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I like that idea. And then the books that you shared are, I don't know if you know this, Leighanne, but our viewers, a lot of us, unfortunately or fortunately, depending how you look at it, are hoarders of books, especially children's books. And so anytime one of our speakers shares a book, we must show the cover, say the title and the author's name, because they will immediately go out and buy it or put it on their wish list. So could you hold each of those books up and say the title and the author's name again for us?
Sure. I have a whole stack next to me, so you'll have to remind me which ones I actually use. So this is Now by Antoinette Portis. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. And she also wrote the book Wait. So it's Now and Wait by Antoinette, Portis.
Wonderful. Those look good. I wrote both of those down.
Those are great, yeah. And then this is Wings by Cheryl Klein.
Okay.
And this is Nanette's Baguette by Mo Williams.
Okay. We
Are
all
those
know.
The only ones that I shared?
We all know and love Mo Williams. He is fantastic. So those are awesome. Yeah, I know another book named Wings, and so then I was like, wait, who wrote that one? Because I know another book named Wings about butterflies. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I will leave.
Wonderful.
I won't add more.
And then we'll put a link below this video to the labels that you mentioned. I really like the idea of labeling things in the house because they're meaningful to the children, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's important that we put a label near, like, give an example of one label for us. Desk. So if you have a desk in your house, you could put a label near the desk.
Or mirror,
yeah. I'm thinking of my nephew, and he has, like, his little toothbrush sits on a stand in his bathroom. Like, maybe you could put a little label on the corner underneath the word mirror next to the toothbrush that says toothbrush.
Yes.
You know?
And it's funny, I mean, as early educators, you guys are probably so much more aware that children often say, you're sort of invited into a child's world when they say something like, what is this called again? You're like, oh, wait. So this common thing that I see every day and take for granted, they're still coming up with their own words, you know, for things. And so that is a great and easy and fun way to just internalize those spellings. Along with the books, I wanted to say, since you're putting a link to the labels, I do have some posts of book lists that are just teaching vowel sounds, and not teaching again, but just repeating those sounds. And then a post for books that repeat sight words as well. Awesome. Not that we're teaching the sight words in early childhood, but they're just repeating them.
Awesome. That's great. You know, I was thinking about your labels again, because I'm all about my labels in my classroom and everywhere. But I'm thinking about my nephew and the way he learns, and he doesn't learn from sitting and saying, this is a D and your name is Drew and this D means you.
Right.
He learns by making connections. So like I'm thinking, I'm going back to the toothbrush again. I don't know why, but if I had toothbrush next to the toothbrush, I had the word, and then I had the word toilet on the toilet. Knowing him and the way he learns, he would make a connection between the T in toilet and the T in toothbrush.
Yes.
Which is a great
on
thing.
His own.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
It's a great thing. I mean, that's so beneficial to him in so many different ways, but it's so exciting for him to come up with that on his own. Sometimes with my youngest child, she likes for us to come up with our own stories at bedtime after we've read a book. It is actually a way to delay sleep, which I'm working on, but she loves it. And so one of her favorite ways to make up stories is to use a sound. So I might say, there's a butterfly named Buttercup. And then she makes up a story saying like, oh, this butterfly named Buttercup lives in Beeville and has a best friend named Bee. And so I think they enjoy coming up with all of those things on their own when you just invite them with a little prompt. Like you were saying, the label can create a conversation.
Yeah. And I like your idea of storytelling, oral storytelling, because stories don't just exist in books. Stories can be told orally. And one of my earliest memories of my mom is we used to camp. We used to camp an incredible amount when I was a child, like more than any person should ever camp, in my opinion. and we would go on these camping trips every single weekend, and we didn't always have a lot of books. And so I recall, I mean, I was 4 years old probably when she told me this story. I remember it word for word. And she made up a story about a character named Tristanelle the Wolfenpickle. And
you still remember the name?
I do.
That's amazing.
Tristanelle the Wolfenpickle and all of the crazy things Tristanella did. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And that was oral storytelling. It was, you know, it was awesome. And your kids will remember that forever. And I also wanted to let you know that you're not alone in that delaying to go to sleep thing, because my nephew, Drew, he loves they've been reading to him since before he was born. And every night they have a ritual. I help them establish a ritual where they read, you know, with him. But he's gotten to the point where he says, another book, another book, another book, another book. And then he wants mom to read 3 books and dad to read 3 books. And then he wants mom to come back and read. And it's just like an endless cycle of, you know, book reading. And they're like, but we know it's good for him. We don't want to tell him no. Like, we know you can't have vegetables. Books are like vegetables. They're good for you. What do we do? And I'm like, I don't know. I've never had that happen in the classroom. But just know that you're not alone and that it's common. And
thank you.
And if, you know, it's not like they're eating Twinkies, you know.
That's true. Although that's another delaying tactic that they have, which is, oh, now I'm hungry.
Now I'm hungry,
wait a minute. You didn't say you were hungry when we were, it's hard.
It's hard.
But thank you for telling me I'm not alone.
Exactly. So I think we have a good basis here of understanding that homework, if we to use that word, homework doesn't have to be horrible. Homework does not equal horrible. Homework can be fun. And when we say homework, it's just I think the word homework has such a connotation for everybody in a different one, that it kind of, maybe we call it home learning or home something else, but, and you've laid that out for us that it can be as simple as reading a really cool picture book. It can be taking a walk and looking at the signs. It can be playing hopscotch, which is great for that kinesthetic learning. But what would you say to somebody who's watching? Because I know there's somebody out there watching right now who may be ready to make this switch. They might feel stuck doing worksheets because that's what they feel their parents want and expect to be sent home, or in even worse situations, it's what their administration tells them they must do. Do you have any words of wisdom for folks like that are in that situation?
Yes, it is so hard because so many of us don't want to ruffle feathers. I think first we have to remember that being a teacher and being a parent means that you are also a child advocate. And so if you believe in the research, then it's sort of part of the job to go look for resources that are going to help you speak to your administrator and to your parents. So I know that you do a really good job of that, providing the language for teachers to go talk to educators. So looking to resources like yours, I'm trying my best to get more language out there to parents and to teachers who believe in all of these not new, but solid ways of learning, but they need to convince others. So I would say take advantage of those around you who are trying to help you provide the language. Use those letters that you have on your website to go, talk to your parents. Most parents today are working parents. It's very hard to get them into the classroom, but I also think that having them come into the classroom and really see what you're doing is a way to make them a believer. And then for early educators who are trying to take that leap from worksheets to more play-based learning, I would encourage you to try it and study your students. Like really take notes and study what they're learning and what they're absorbing to sort of make yourself a believer and to say, I've watched this, I've researched it, I've taken this data, and now I know that this is a better approach for the majority of my students. Going back to the first question we were talking about, where I, as a reading specialist, am often provided the opportunity to let a child master a concept before they move on, but so many teachers are not given that freedom. I think that is one aspect that you can really speak to your administration about and say, okay, I know that I'm not supposed to move on from this concept until most of my students have shown that they are not just acing the spelling test, but they're using it in context. So I know that's kind of talking to educators who are in elementary, but I think what I'm saying is at an early childhood standpoint, you want to know that the concepts that they are learning and practicing in all areas like drama, writing center, science, that they're really absorbing them. And so becoming just an observer of your students is a great way to make yourself a believer. And then, of course, taking advantage of amazing people like you who are giving us the language. And then thirdly, inviting parents in to really show them the benefits.
I think that's a really important point that I want to make sure viewers watching caught, because the best way to get anyone to get on board with this type of learning is for them to see it. And that means inviting parents in, because so often that's difficult to do in today's day and age, where we have so many barriers of entry for parents coming into the classroom. But if there's any way, I feel like if there could be family nights, education nights,
yes,
multiple opportunities throughout the year, not every week, it doesn't even have to be every month, but strategically planned events where parents come in and they experience the play with the children. I think those are so powerful. And I've done them, for 20 years. I did these in my own classroom, and I was fortunate enough that my district supported that, and it was mandatory through Title I. But I had so many parents come up to me and say, I had no idea that Play-Doh was actually learning. Like, I thought it was just like a horrible mess making thing that some evil person created. And they were like, I never saw it as a learning tool. And when they would come in and see it in action and do it with their children, they were like, oh, I can get this stuff at the dollar store, or I can make it at home. And this is great, so don't be afraid.
That reminds me also, when I was talking about some of my best tricks, I would say the thing that I talk to parents most about, I forgot to mention, which is take something like salt or sand, or go outside in the dirt. If you don't want to waste a whole can of salt, dump the salt into a bowl, let them mix it like they're baking with food coloring, and then trace your letters in the salt. If you don't want to waste the salt, do it in the sand. If you have glitter washi tape, that's a great one to create a tactile experience. Just trace the letter on glitter washi tape. I always carry that with me because then I'm not taking salt or sand into a school, which can get a little messy and not super popular. But that tends to be something that they do remember and helps them transfer it into their long-term memory. I agree with you that it's really hard to get parents to come into the school during the school day, but you can have a literacy night or a family night, as you said, because I do think that getting parents on board is key, and it's the most helpful for children when parents are reinforcing the same language or the same concepts at home. And it's so helpful to parents. I mean, it's so helpful to them when you're able to give them language that's going to be helpful with their child at home.
Absolutely. And I know that a lot of teachers out there may think, that, and I say this because I've mentored many, many teachers, and the thought of, in addition to teaching all day and preparing every night and every weekend and the lesson planning and all of that, now I have to teach classes to parents. Like, that's like way over the top. And the good news is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because there's lots of people who've gone before you and done all the hard work. And all you have to do is just allow the opportunity, allow it to happen, and use the resources that are out there to guide you, because it is, instead of rolling the boulder uphill with the parents, you're rolling the boulder downhill. Anything you can do to make your job easier is time well spent, in my opinion.
I agree.
And the other thing I wanted to say about that is, the earlier we get the parents accustomed to coming into the school building and working with the teacher, the more we are establishing that basis for communication that can last throughout their entire school career. Because some parents think, well, the school building is where the children go. I stay over here at work or at my house. I don't, never the two shall meet. And we don't want that either, do we?
Right. And and we know that it creates such a more supportive environment for a child. I mean, I think there's that statistic about children doing better in school when they know their parents are sort of a part of the learning in some way, or their caretakers or their babysitter or nanny are familiar with those things that are happening in their classrooms.
Well,
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think early educators are the experts at teaching reading, and they so often don't even know that. So I just wanted to sort of say to your audience that I feel like early educators have such a valuable role, and they're so needed and wanted, and they have such a huge opportunity, because I think, as you know, I can speak as an elementary teacher, I would go to PDs and all of these conferences to learn things like readers theater, and how to craft these things that you guys in early education are doing every day in the drama center or in acting out stories. I mean, these are things that are more intuitive to early educators, but I don't know that they always get the credit for teaching all of these literacy skills in one place. And then as we progress with elementary teachers and middle schoolers, they're always crying out for, like, I need help in how to teach reading because my kids aren't reading, and I can't teach social studies until they've mastered these other concepts. And so I think that's where your audience has such a huge advantage and huge role in setting the tone for the rest of a child's reading success. And I feel like they're really the experts at doing this, that, you know, we could use your knowledge and your expertise in older grades.
Well, thank you for saying that, because that's definitely not something that we're used to hearing, and we receive very little credit for anything. So we appreciate, on behalf of all the viewers, thank you. We appreciate that. So I think we've had a great talk today. In closing, I just want to ask you, what is that one gold nugget, if you will, that you want all the viewers who are watching today to walk away with? Is there one main message that we're trying to get through here? And if so, what is it?
Well, I would say take advantage of the resources around you, because you do have such an opportunity to build relationships with parents at a very young age that sets the tone for the child's academic future. As we were saying at the beginning of our conversation, children either come to that fixed mindset at such a young age of whether they're smart or not smart, good or not good. And so the more early educators we have buying into playful learning and encouraging parents to engage in playful learning and helping parents see what a huge role they have also in their child's learning, I think we have a real gift and huge opportunity, again, in setting the tone for the rest of their academic future. So again, just remember how valuable you are. And then remember that you don't have to do it on your own. Like, you have already created these resources in speaking to administration or parents that early educators can use. And I'm trying to do the same around reading. So don't feel like you have to do it all on your own.
Absolutely. That's fabulous advice. I'd love to thank you again, Leighanne, for joining us today. And thank you to all of you who've tuned in. If you would like a little more time with any of the ideas and suggestions we discussed in this session or any of the others, don't forget you can bring those sessions home with you along with some terrific bonuses. Just click the link below this video, and don't forget that the prices go up the day after the conference ends. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin, and this is Leighanne Scheuermann. Thank you, Leighanne.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.